You know the feeling. That tightness in your chest when a colleague receives recognition you believe you deserved, that careful calculation before speaking in meetings, weighing every word for strategic advantage. That exhaustion after social gatherings where you perform brilliantly yet feel somehow hollow. That constant gnawing need to prove yourself, to win, to demonstrate that you are not to be underestimated. You call this ambition. You call it professional savvy. You call it the price of success in a competitive world. I call it slavery, and I can prove it. Every moment you spend calculating how to defeat others is a moment you do not spend on your own actual growth. Every victory in contest defined by others simply confirms your acceptance of their authority to determine what counts as victory. Every strategic maneuver in games you never chose to play is evidence that the game is already won, that you have internalized so completely the logic of competition that you can no longer imagine an alternative. The uncomfortable truth: you are not competing to win. You are competing because you have been trained to compete, because everyone around you competes, because the alternative genuine independence from these games seems impossible or even incomprehensible. You are a prisoner who has memorized the architecture of your cell so thoroughly that you call this knowledge freedom. I will show you the door, but first you must see the bars. Every morning you rise and answer the same question, though you do not realize you are answering it. Your actions, not your words, reveal your answer. The question is this: what makes me powerful? Watch yourself for 3 days. Where does your energy actually go? I observe that most men answer this question falsely through their behavior. They believe power comes from defeating others, from winning arguments at the university, from extracting favorable terms in commerce, from climbing above their colleagues in position and prestige. They expend enormous energy competing, calculating, positioning themselves relative to others, and they call this success. But consider what they have actually achieved. They have accepted that life is fundamentally competitive. They have internalized the rules of games they never chose to play. They measure themselves by standards, others created standards, designed specifically to keep them domesticated, controllable, forever comparing themselves to those around them, rather than developing according to their own inner law. I knew 2 professors at Basel who pursued the same appointment. The first schemed constantly, undermining rivals, courting powerful colleagues, publishing strategically to advance his position. He won the appointment. Yet observe him 10 years later. Anxious, defensive, producing work designed only to maintain his status rather than to advance understanding. His victory was his defeat. The second colleague, rejected, continued his own research in relative obscurity. His work was ignored during his lifetime. Today, 20 years later, the first man's books gather dust, while the second has transformed his field. Who possessed real power? The one who won the contest others defined, or the one who exempted himself from their contest entirely and built according to his own vision? This is the fatal error. Accepting that power comes from relative position rather than absolute growth. The moment you agree to measure yourself against others, the moment you accept that defeating them makes you strong, you have already been defeated. You have granted others the authority to determine what counts as victory. You have become a player in their game, fighting on ground they chose, by rules they wrote. True power flows from an entirely different question. What do I want to create? Not defeat create. Not win build. Not rise above others, grow according to my own potential. This redirection from comparative to creative changes everything. But first you must see how deeply you have been conditioned to answer the wrong question. Every game has rules. Every rule serves interests. And here is what you have not yet understood. The game exists not to crown victors, but to create players. I walked yesterday through the commercial district of Turin, observing merchants at their negotiations. One man, particularly clever, extracted extraordinarily favorable terms from a supplier. His colleagues congratulated him. He had won. But I asked, what had he actually won? He had demonstrated mastery within a system whose very structure that worth is measured monetarily, that success equals commercial advantage, that a man's value is determined by his market position he had never questioned. His victory simply confirmed his subordination to premises he did not choose. This is how power actually operates. The truly powerful do not defeat you in contests. They convince you that their contests are the only contests that matter. They persuade you to play games whose rules guarantee your domestication, regardless of whether you win or lose. Consider the academic who publishes extensively to achieve recognition from his colleagues. Win or lose, he has accepted the premise that scholarly worth is determined by peer approval, that knowledge is validated by committee, that truth is whatever the majority of credentialed experts agree upon. The game publish, cite, conform, receive recognition has trapped him completely. He cannot see that his very participation, his investment of life energy in these rituals, has made him an instrument of the system rather than its master. Or observe the socialite who maneuvers skillfully through complex social hierarchies, winning allies and defeating rivals in intricate political dramas. She congratulates herself on her victories. But whose values has she internalized? Whose vision of human worth has she accepted? She has become expert at a game that exists precisely to ensure no one ever asks whether the game itself deserves to be played. The rules are arbitrary. The board is constructed. The pieces move according to patterns designed by those who benefit from your playing. And you have studied the rules so carefully, mastered the moves so completely, that you have forgotten to ask the only question that matters. Whose interest does this game serve? When you compete for academic recognition, you validate academia's authority to judge intellectual worth. When you chase commercial success, you validate market logic as the measure of value. When you seek social approval, you validate society's standards as the arbiter of human worth. Your participation is your subordination. Your victory is the system's victory over you. The prisoner who becomes expert at prison routines has not achieved freedom, he has achieved contentment with his chains. I observe that you cannot be outsmarted if you refuse to play. But first you must see the game clearly. You must recognize that what appears as natural competition is actually constructed domestication, that what seems like objective measures of success are actually interested impositions, that every invitation to compete is actually an invitation to subordinate yourself to those who wrote the rules. Attention is power in its rawest form. Like water flowing downhill, it follows the path of least resistance toward what captures, provokes, threatens, or promises validation. Most men do not direct their attention. They allow it to be pulled, scattered, drained continuously by others until they arrive at evening exhausted, wondering where their day disappeared. For 3 years after my friendship with Wagner ended, I found myself mentally arguing with him. When walking alone through the mountains above Sils Maria time, I needed for my own thinking. I would rehearse refutations of his positions, practice responses to criticisms he had never made, defend myself against accusations he had never voiced. This consumed enormous energy while producing absolutely nothing of value. Wagner, living comfortably in Bayreuth, had no idea he dominated my consciousness. I was giving him my power freely. He was living in my head without paying rent. The turning point came when I recognized this pattern clearly. I calculated that perhaps 40% of my conscious thought involved Wagner defending myself against him, proving my independence from him, refuting his ideas, justifying my separation. 40%. And what did this produce? Nothing. It drained power I needed for my actual work. It kept me organized around him, even in opposition. It made me reactive rather than creative. I began practicing immediate redirection. When I caught my attention flowing toward Wagner, I would interrupt the pattern. What do I want to think about in this moment? What question genuinely interests me? What work needs my attention? This simple practice, recognizing the drainage and consciously redirecting, gradually changed where my power flowed. Within months, I rarely thought of Wagner at all. The energy I had wasted in mental argument became available for "Thus spoke Zarathustra." Now observe yourself. Where does your attention actually go? You believe it serves your projects, your growth, your purposes, but audit it honestly for 3 days. How much flows toward managing others' perceptions of you? How much toward defending yourself from criticism? How much toward positioning yourself relative to competitors? How much toward seeking validation from those whose judgment you claim not to care about? Most men discover they spend perhaps 80% of their mental energy on others, on what others think, what others might say, how others might react, whether others approve. Only 20% remains for their own projects, their own growth, their own authentic concerns. This is energetic bankruptcy. You cannot build anything significant with only 20% of your power. The other 80% leaked continuously to manage, defend, compete, seek approval is simply wasted. The practice is simple but requires vigilance. Each time you notice attention flowing toward others' opinions or perceptions, pause. Ask yourself, does this thought serve my growth, or does it merely drain my power? If it drains, redirect immediately to your own projects. This is not selfishness. This is hygiene, protecting your most valuable resource from parasitic consumption. You believe your values fell from heaven or emerged from reason. They did neither. They originated in specific historical circumstances to serve specific interests, and those interests were not yours. Let me show you how this works. In ancient Rome, strength was honored. The warrior who conquered, the senator who commanded, the builder who created great works, these were the exemplars of human excellence. Power was celebrated openly. The strong did not apologize for their strength. Then came Christianity, and with it a revolution in values so complete that modern man can barely perceive it occurred. The Christians who were weak, who could not defeat Rome militarily, who possessed no political power, achieved through morality what they could not achieve through force. They declared that the strong were evil, that power itself was sinful, that suffering made one virtuous, that the meek would inherit the earth. This was not philosophical argument. This was psychological revenge. The weak, unable to defeat the strong on the strong's terms, changed the terms entirely. They made weakness into virtue, suffering into nobility, powerlessness into moral superiority. And Rome fell not to military conquest, but to this inversion of values. The warrior came to doubt his warriorship. The powerful came to question their power. Strength itself, the very capacity for life, for creation, for command, became something to apologize for, something to constrain, something vaguely shameful. The weak had won completely. They had convinced the strong that strength was evil. Now observe modern man. He still carries these inversions unconsciously. He believes that humility is superior to pride, that self-sacrifice is nobler than self-assertion, that suffering makes one morally worthy. He has internalized completely the slave's values, values created specifically to domesticate the powerful, to make them question and constrain their own strength. And he calls this civilization progress, sophistication. But ask yourself, who taught you these values? The priest, who needed your submission; the moralist, who needed your guilt; the egalitarian, who needed your strength diminished so his weakness would not be so apparent. Every value that makes you doubt your own power, question your own worth, constrain your own growth, trace its origin, you will find it emerges from those who benefit from your self-constraint. I do not say all egalitarian values are invalid. I say examine their genealogy before accepting them. Were they created by the strong sharing their abundance, or by the weak demanding redistribution? The first creates genuine value. The second creates resentment dressed as morality. Learn to distinguish between them. Your freedom depends on seeing through values to their origins, their interests, their true function, which is often to domesticate you while convincing you that domestication is virtue. Listen to your own thoughts for a single day. I will tell you with certainty whether you possess master consciousness or slave consciousness. The distinction is absolute, and it reveals itself in the fundamental question that organizes your thinking. The slave asks, how can I defeat the master? How can I undermine his power, limit his freedom, force him to acknowledge me, bring him down to my level? Every thought is reactive, organized around the master, measured against external authorities. Even in revolt, the slave remains enslaved, for his very rebellion takes its shape from what he opposes. He is never the source of his own direction, only the reactor to forces outside himself. I knew two scholars at Leipzig. The first obsessed over departmental politics, which professors held power, which publications would advance his career, which alliances to form, which rivals to undermine. His every decision was strategic, calculated according to the system's rewards and punishments. He succeeded by these measures. He achieved position, salary, recognition, but observe the quality of his work. Derivative, careful, designed primarily to offend no one and advance his position. He had mastered the game but produced nothing original. His life was entirely reactive, responding to the system's demands, competing within its framework, seeking its validation. The second scholar simply followed questions that genuinely fascinated him. He wrote what needed to be written, regardless of whether it would help his career. He pursued truth where it led, without calculating strategic advantage. The system did not reward him. He struggled professionally, published little in prestigious journals, never achieved high position. Yet his few works transformed his field entirely. Why? Because he asked the master's question, what do I want to create? What understanding do I want to bring into existence? His consciousness was organized around his own projects, not around defeating rivals or gaining recognition. The master scarcely thinks of the slave at all. This is not cruelty, but natural focus. The master's attention is directed toward his own creations, his own projects, his own growth. The slave exists peripherally as an instrument, perhaps, but never as the organizing principle of consciousness. When the slave tries to provoke the master feels confusion. Why would I care about this? The slave interprets this as arrogance. It is actually indifference, born of genuine self-direction. Now, examine your own consciousness honestly. What percentage of your thoughts are reactive, defending yourself, competing with others, responding to provocations, managing perceptions, seeking validation? And what percentage are creative, developing your own ideas, building your own projects, following your own curiosity? If reactive thoughts dominate, you possess slave consciousness, regardless of your social position. If creative thoughts dominate, you possess master consciousness, regardless of your circumstances. The shift from slave to master consciousness is not philosophical abstraction. It is practical reorientation with immediate effects. Begin each day by asking, what do I want to create today? Not how will I compete today? Not how will I defend myself today? Not how will I win recognition today? Simply, what do I want to create? This single question, asked sincerely and answered honestly, begins the transformation from reactive to creative consciousness. The most enslaved man is not he who wears literal chains, but he who measures himself by standards he never chose. I observe this constantly in modern life. Men exhausting themselves trying to satisfy criteria set by institutions, traditions, and authorities they never consciously accepted. They succeed or fail by measures they inherited unconsciously, never asking the only question that matters: do these standards deserve to measure me? When I resigned my professorship at Basel, forced by illness, but also by growing recognition that academic life was destroying my actual work, conventional standards judged me a failure. I had lost position, income, status, the respect of colleagues. By every external measure, I had fallen. Yet those years of wandering, living in boarding houses in Sils Maria and Nice and Turin, writing in rented rooms on a modest pension, these were my most productive years. I created my mature philosophy, not by meeting academic standards, but by creating my own standards for what philosophy should be. The Academy said philosophy must be systematic, cautious, approved by peers, published in proper journals, expressed in technical language, accessible only to specialists. I said philosophy must be lived truth, dangerous insight, expressed in language that strikes like lightning, accessible to anyone with courage to think. The Academy rejected me. I rejected the Academy's authority to judge. Both positions cannot be right. I chose to be right for myself rather than right for them. This is transvaluation. You live according to standards you never chose. Your income level, your job title, your social position, the respect of peers, the approval of family, these measure your success. But did you choose these measures? Or did you absorb them unconsciously from the culture that raised you, from the class you were born into, from the institutions you passed through? Most men discover, when they examine honestly, that they pursue goals they never consciously selected. They measure themselves by standards that feel objective, but are actually arbitrary. The practice of transvaluation begins with audit. List every standard by which you currently judge your success. For each one, ask, did I choose this or did I inherit it? Does meeting this standard actually make me feel powerful and alive, or does it merely make me acceptable to others? This investigation reveals the gap between received values and authentic values. Most men discover they spend their lives pursuing goals that mean nothing to them personally. Goals they chase only because they were told these goals matter. Once you see this clearly, you face the terrifying freedom of self-legislation. If external standards do not bind you, what does? You must become the source of value rather than its recipient. You must generate your own standards. Determine for yourself what makes a life successful, meaningful, worthy of being lived. This responsibility is crushing for those who need external authority. It is liberating for those who can bear the weight of their own judgment. Transvaluation is not mere rebellion. The teenager who rejects his parents' values simply to assert independence has not transvalued. He remains organized around what he rejects, still allowing others to determine his direction through opposition. True transvaluation moves beyond both acceptance and rejection to creation. You develop values from your own lived experience, from your own capacity for growth, from your own vision of human possibility. You become, in the deepest sense, the legislator of your own existence. Transformation is not a sudden leap, but a series of turnings, 5 specific reorientations that build upon each other progressively. I discovered these through my own painful journey from academic servitude to genuine independence. Each turning prepares the ground for the next. Each requires both intellectual understanding and behavioral modification. Together, they convert. Philosophical insight into lived reality. The first turning, recognizing attention as power and auditing where it flows. For 3 days, track your attention rigorously. Where does it actually go? Not where you think it should go, but where it actually goes. I discovered that perhaps 70% of my mental energy was flowing toward managing others' perceptions, defending myself from critics, positioning myself relative to colleagues. This was not serving my growth, it was pure drainage. But I had to quantify it, had to see it clearly before I could change it. You cannot redirect what you do not see. The second turning, recognizing most social interaction as enforcement ritual rather than genuine exchange. Watch carefully at your next faculty, gathering, or commercial meeting or social dinner. Are people actually exchanging ideas, risking disagreement, pursuing truth, or are they performing a careful dance confirming shared assumptions, punishing deviation through subtle signals, prioritizing harmony over honesty? Most conversation is enforcement. Once you see this clearly, you can exempt yourself from these rituals, saving enormous energy for genuine exchanges. The third turning, cultivating solitude as source of power rather than mark of failure. The herd teaches that constant social contact equals fullness, that solitude equals loneliness. This is self-serving delusion. In solitude, you hear your own voice. In solitude, great work emerges. In solitude, you stop performing and start becoming. Schedule daily solitude, minimum. 30 minutes of genuine withdrawal from others' demands. Initially uncomfortable, eventually essential. The fourth turning, developing physiological sensitivity to what strengthens versus weakens you. Your body knows truths, your mind rationalizes away. Certain people deplete you. You leave interactions exhausted, resentful, hollow. Certain environments drain vitality. Certain activities leave you empty. Learn to trust these. Physical responses, more than social obligations or rational arguments. This is hygiene. Don't consume what poisons you, regardless of how it's presented or how many people insist it's nutritious. The fifth turning, practicing active, forgetting to release resentments and grievances. The weak have perfect memory for every slight, every injury, every unfairness. They believe this memory serves them. It imprisons them. The strong forget not because they're careless, but because they're overflowing with present purpose. When you notice yourself mentally rehearsing old conflicts, interrupt immediately. This costs power I need for creation. Redirect to present work. This releases enormous energy previously trapped in the past. These turnings are not simultaneous. Implement progressively. Week 1, attention audit. Week 2, enforcement recognition. Week 3, establish daily solitude. Week 4, develop physiological sensitivity. Week 5, practice active forgetting. By week 5, you vary. Operate with fundamentally different energy, economy less drainage, more creation. The transformation is both psychological and physiological, both behavioral and existential. You convert from reactive to proactive, from externally driven to internally propelled. I stood at the edge of a faculty gathering in Basel, observing two conversations simultaneously. In the first, 3 professors discussed a controversial text, but they were not actually discussing it, they were performing sophisticated agreement. Each statement was carefully calibrated not to offend. Each participant monitored the other's reactions, adjusting positions to maintain harmony. When one young instructor ventured genuine disagreement, the temperature dropped instantly. Subtle signals flashed disapproval, correction, social pressure. He retreated. The performance resumed. In the corner, 2 younger scholars genuinely argued about ideas. They disagreed sharply. They risked offense. They prioritized understanding over harmony. Neither performed for invisible authorities. They engaged authentically with ideas and each other. After an hour, the senior professors were exhausted from their careful performance. The young scholars were energized. Same room, opposite energy dynamics. This is the skill you must develop, distinguishing enforcement from exchange. Enforcement drains you because it requires constant self-monitoring, careful calibration, suppression of authentic response. You must perform agreement, signal conformity, punish deviation. You leave depleted. Genuine exchange energizes because you can speak directly, think openly, risk disagreement. You leave clarified, even if you disagreed, because something real occurred. Learn the markers of enforcement. First, observe whether disagreement is welcomed or punished. If dissent triggers discomfort, appeals to what everyone knows, or social correction, you're witnessing enforcement. Second, notice whether people speak their thoughts or perform careful calibrations. If every statement is hedged, qualified, presented for approval, it's enforcement. Third, check whether the conversation seeks truth or consensus. If harmony trumps accuracy, it's enforcement. Genuine exchange has opposite markers. Both parties speak directly. Disagreement energizes rather than threatens. Neither performs for third parties. They engage authentically. You can say what you actually think without elaborate qualification. The conversation moves toward understanding, not toward predetermined conclusion. These exchanges are rare but unmistakable once you learn to recognize them. Once you identify enforcement, exempt yourself without drama. Do not announce your exemption. This makes you the topic of enforcement. Instead, become boringly agreeable with minimal participation, or excuse yourself gracefully. Save your authentic engagement for genuine exchanges. This conservation of energy is crucial. Most men exhaust themselves performing, constantly in enforcement rituals, because they have never learned to distinguish performance from authentic exchange. At your next gathering, observe rather than automatically performing. Notice when you feel pressure to agree despite disagreeing. Notice when you calibrate statements for approval rather than accuracy. Notice when you suppress authentic response to maintain harmony. These moments signal enforcement. Notice also rare moments when you can speak directly. These signal genuine exchange. Withdraw energy from the first. Invest in the second. Your energy economy transforms immediately. They pity my solitude. When I resigned my professorship and began my years of wandering, living in boarding houses, walking alone for hours through the Swiss mountains, writing in rented rooms with no colleagues, no social obligations, no daily contact with the academic world, my former colleagues expressed concern. He has lost everything, they said. No position, no status, no community. How isolated he must feel. They understood nothing. What appeared to them as deprivation was actually liberation. In those solitary walks above Sils Maria, thus spoke Zarathustra emerged. In those quiet rooms in Nice and Turin, my mature philosophy developed. In that supposed isolation, I achieved more genuine productivity than in all my years of academic employment. Why? Because solitude gave me what crowds never could. Mental space to think thoughts that require hours to develop, freedom from constant performance, independence from the herd's limiting assumptions. The herd teaches that solitude equals failure, inability to connect, social inadequacy, isolation born of deficiency. This is self-serving delusion designed to keep you dependent on the collective. The herd needs you to need them. The person who can be happy alone is ungovernable. They cannot control you through approval or threaten you through rejection if you have learned to generate your own purpose rather than borrowing it from others. Solitude is not absence of others, but presence of self. Not failed connection, but successful independence. Not isolation, but liberation. In solitude, you hear your own thoughts rather than the cacophony of others' demands. You attend to your own projects rather than managing perceptions. You develop ideas rather than defending positions. All great work, philosophy, art, science, genuine insight emerges from solitude, not from committees or crowds or constant social performance. Begin today. Schedule 30 minutes of genuine solitude, not entertainment, not distraction, not checking devices, but actual withdrawal from others' presence. Walk or sit somewhere you will not be interrupted. Simply be alone with your thoughts. Initially, this is uncomfortable. The herd animal fears separation from the herd, but persist. After 2 weeks, you will notice changes. Thoughts deepen, ideas emerge, internal clarity increases. After a month, this solitude becomes essential. You will guard it as fiercely as you once sought social connection. Others will try to interrupt your solitude. They will use guilt. You're avoiding us. They will appeal to obligation. You should be networking. They will pathologize. It's not healthy to be alone so much. Develop firm boundaries. I need this time for my work as complete explanation. No justification, no apology, no negotiation. Those who respect your solitude respect you. Those who don't are trying to pull you back into the herd where you can be controlled through their approval or disapproval. Do not confuse solitude with isolation. Solitude is chosen. Isolation is imposed. Solitude is temporary withdrawal to strengthen yourself. Isolation is permanent separation that weakens. You do not avoid all human contact. You establish regular independence from constant social performance. You engage with others from choice rather than need, from fullness rather than emptiness. Once you experience the power of genuine solitude, you can never again mistake constant social contact for fullness or mistake independence for loneliness. At a faculty dinner in Basel, I observed Professor M working the room strategically. He positioned himself near senior colleagues, joined conversations at carefully calculated moments, said things designed to impress while watching anxiously for reactions. He monitored constantly who was gaining attention, who was losing influence, who might threaten his position. After 2 hours, he was visibly depleted, shoulders tense, expression tight, energy drained, yet he would describe the evening as successful. He had networked, he had made impressions, he had competed effectively. I spent those same 2 hours in genuine conversation with two younger scholars about ideas that fascinated us. We disagreed sharply on several points. We pursued understanding without regard for what others might think. When the conversation reached its natural end, I left. I returned to my boarding house still full of energy, having engaged authentically rather than performed strategically. Professor M had succeeded by social measures. I had lived. This is the fundamental distinction you must grasp. Every social situation offers two possible orientations, each producing radically different outcomes. The strategic orientation asks, who is important here? Who threatens my position? What impression should I make? This activates anxiety, competition, performance. You must monitor constantly, defend territory, manage perceptions. The genuine orientation asks, what interests me here? With whom can I engage authentically? This activates curiosity, connection, ease. You simply engage with what genuinely interests you and politely disengage from what doesn't. The difference is both psychological and physiological. Strategic orientation drains energy, even when successful, because it requires constant vigilance and performance. Genuine orientation conserves or even generates energy, because you're not wasting power on impression management. Most men default to strategic orientation unconsciously, then wonder why social interaction exhausts them. They have never considered that a different orientation is possible. Before entering your next gathering, consciously choose genuine orientation. Speak only to people who genuinely interest you. Say only things you actually mean. When bored, leave, rather than performing continued interest. When provoked, decline engagement rather than defending yourself. This requires courage. Initially, you're violating social norms about mandatory participation and constant performance. But notice the energy differential. You leave with power intact rather than depleted. Keep a simple journal for 1 week. After each social interaction, note, which orientation did I adopt, strategic or genuine? How did I feel afterward, depleted or energized? What percentage was authentic engagement versus performance? Most men discover they default to strategic orientation in 70 to 80% of interactions, explaining their perpetual exhaustion. This awareness itself begins change. You cannot continue unconscious patterns once you see them clearly. The transformation is both practical and existential. Practically, you gain consistent energy economy in social situations. Where you once returned from gatherings exhausted, you now return energized, or at least not drained. Existentially, you live more authentically. You perform less, you are more. You compete less, you create more. You waste less energy on managing others' perceptions and invest more in genuine connection with the rare individuals capable of authentic exchange. Every professional faces this choice, though few make it consciously. Pursue your vision or chase opportunities. The opportunist asks, what will succeed? What does the market want? What will advance my position? And conducts work accordingly. He may achieve wealth and recognition, but he builds nothing lasting, creates no genuine value, dies having accumulated much but created nothing that couldn't have existed without him. I observed two merchants in the commercial district of Turin. The first studied market trends obsessively. pursuing whatever seemed profitable textiles one season, spices the next, always chasing opportunity. He made considerable money. But walk through Turin today, you will find no trace of him. He built nothing distinctive, created nothing valuable beyond profit. He was an efficient channel for market forces, but never a creator. The second merchant had a vision, to create beautiful objects for daily use at accessible prices. The market did not initially understand his vision. People wanted cheap goods or luxury goods, not this strange combination of beauty and accessibility. He struggled for years, but gradually, persistently, he built something unique. Today, his creations are throughout the city. He left a legacy objects that bear his individual stamp, that could not have existed without his specific vision. At 70, the first merchant counted his money and felt empty. The second saw his creation living in the city and knew he had lived. This is not romantic abstraction, but practical reality. The opportunist's work dies with him because it was never truly his. It was simply efficient response to market signals anyone could have executed. The visionary's work lives because it could only have come from him. It bears the mark of his unique perception, his specific capabilities, his individual vision of what ought to exist. You face this choice constantly, though perhaps unconsciously. In every professional decision, you choose between what serves your vision and what seems opportune. Most men make 80% opportunity-driven choices while claiming to pursue vision. The gap between aspiration and action reveals their true orientation. They want to build something meaningful, but they actually chase whatever seems advantageous. They want to leave a legacy, but they actually accumulate resources and positions. The test is simple. Project 5 years forward. If you continue your current professional trajectory, where will you be? Will you have built something you're proud of, something unique, something that matters beyond your personal advancement? Or will you simply have accumulated more resources, more status, more positions that mean nothing to you personally? This projection clarifies whether your choices serve genuine vision or mere advancement. Building according to vision requires courage because it means resisting market pressures, accepting potential struggle, trusting that vision will eventually find its audience or its use. It requires either independent resources or faith that meaningful work eventually gets recognized. Either way, it demands saying no to opportunism that would distract from your actual work. This is difficult. Most men lack this courage. They rationalize every opportunity chase as somehow serving their vision, never admitting they've abandoned vision entirely for advancement. But I tell you, the visionary life, even if it struggles, satisfies in ways opportunism never can. Even when vision work is difficult, you wake energized because you're building something meaningful. Even when opportunity work succeeds, you feel hollow because it serves advancement rather than creation. Choose vision over opportunism. Accept the trade-offs. Live with satisfaction rather than mere success. Forget money, status, achievements. These are secondary. Your real capital is vital energy. Every person, activity, obligation, and relationship either adds to or subtracts from this capital. Most men hemorrhage energy unconsciously, then wonder why they feel perpetually exhausted despite adequate sleep and despite their apparent success by external measures. During my wandering years, I learned extreme selectivity about energy expenditure. Some correspondents energized me, their letters sparked ideas, challenged my thinking, generated new connections. I maintained those correspondences enthusiastically. Other correspondents drained me their letters, demanded reassurance, created obligations, imposed guilt. I allowed those correspondences to lapse. Same action letter writing, opposite energy effects. This selectivity was not cold, but necessary. It enabled the work that mattered. The practice is simple. Maintain an energy ledger. For 2 weeks, track every significant interaction, activity, and obligation. After each, note whether you feel more or less energized. Use simple notation. +2 for significantly energizing, +1 for mildly energizing, 0 for neutral, -1 for mildly draining, -2 for significantly draining. At week's end, review the data. You will discover specific patterns. Certain people consistently drain, certain activities consistently energize, certain obligations consistently deplete. Most men discover they maintain 5 to 10 significant energy drains that serve no purpose except habit or misplaced obligation. A relationship maintained through guilt rather than genuine connection. An obligation accepted through inability to refuse. An activity continued because I've always done this rather than because it serves current growth. These drains, steady, constant, unconscious, explain the perpetual exhaustion that no amount of sleep remedies. Once you see the drains clearly, begin systematic elimination. Start with the -2 seconds. End the relationship. Refuse the obligation. Stop the activity. This seems harsh. It is necessary. You cannot create anything significant while hemorrhaging power to unnecessary drains. Move to the negative, 1 second. Minimize frequency. Reduce intensity. Establish boundaries. The goal is not eliminating all drains, some are necessary, but eliminating unnecessary drains maintained through unconsciousness or guilt. Simultaneously increase investment in consistent energizers. Spend more time with people rated +2. Expand activities rated +1. Seek more of what consistently energizes you. This seems obvious, but few do it. They maintain equal investment in drains and energizers, or even prioritize drains out of guilt. The teaching? Ruthlessly favor what energizes, minimize what drains, and watch your total energy capital grow rather than perpetually depleting. Today, identify one relationship that consistently drains you. Decide, can this be restructured, or must investment be reduced? Identify one relationship that consistently energizes you. Decide, how can I invest more here? This simple rebalancing, less to drains, more to energizers, begins transforming your energy economy immediately. Over weeks, you will feel the difference. More power available for what matters, less wasted on what doesn't. Life becomes energizing rather than exhausting because you've stopped letting others consume what you need for your own creation. Here is what the herd must never understand. Their entire world depends on your subordination. Every institution, church teaching humility, state demanding obedience, market rewarding conformity, academy punishing originality, exists fundamentally to domesticate, to level, to ensure no one rises too far above the collective average. They do not do this through conscious conspiracy. The structure itself domesticates through its inherent logic, its method of operation, its system of rewards and punishments. When I published views contrary to German nationalism, contrary to Christian morality, contrary to academic consensus, the response was not rational counter-argument. I was not refuted but ostracized, not engaged but dismissed, not debated but pathologized. Why? Because my exemption from shared values threatened the entire structure. If one person can question Christianity's authority, all can. If one person can create his own values, all can. Better to cast me as mad, sick, dangerous, anything to prevent serious engagement with what I represented, the possibility of genuine independence from collective values. This is how society protects itself from those who might escape, not through argument, which would acknowledge the validity of questioning, but through enforcement. You are made to feel guilty for your independence, ashamed of your autonomy, socially unacceptable for your refusal to subordinate yourself to collective judgments. The pressure is constant and multi-layered. Family disappointment, peer disapproval, professional penalties, social exclusion. Most men cannot withstand this pressure. They conform. They call their conformity wisdom, maturity, social responsibility. But observe carefully what conformity actually achieves. Education teaches you to answer questions, not ask them, to memorize approved answers, not generate original thought. Commerce teaches you to measure worth monetarily, success materially. Religion teaches you to judge yourself by external moral standards rather than generate your own. Politics teaches you to subordinate individual will to collective good. Each institution claims to serve you while actually serving social order, which requires your domestication. Society controls not through force, but through making you need its validation. You are taught to derive worth from its approval, meaning from its standards, identity from its categories. Once you need society's validation, you police yourself, constraining your own behavior, suppressing your own thoughts, modifying your own values to maintain that validation. This self-policing is far more effective than external enforcement. The prisoner who has internalized his prison's logic doesn't need guards. Understanding this, that society's structure depends fundamentally on your subordination, means recognizing that your genuine independence threatens it. When you exempt yourself from collective values, create your own standards, refuse validation seeking, society will respond. Expect guilt about your independence. Expect attempts to pathologize your autonomy. Expect pressure to conform. This pressure confirms you have actually escaped, not merely fantasized about escape. Those who remain comfortable in society have not yet threatened its domestication mechanisms. I do not counsel paranoid withdrawal or righteous rebellion. The teaching is about psychological independence while maintaining strategic social participation. Some conformity is necessary. Bills must be paid, certain obligations met, but you conform consciously, strategically, without granting society authority over your core values. You participate in its structures without internalizing its judgments. You use society without being used by it. This distinction between strategic participation and psychological subordination is everything. On a day in August 1881, walking by the pyramidal rock near Lake Silvaplana, 6,000 feet beyond man and time, the thought struck me with such force that I marked the spot. The concept, eternal recurrence. The question, will the eternal return of your life, exactly as you have lived it, infinitely? This is not abstract speculation, but the most practical question possible. It reveals instantly whether you have actually lived your life or merely performed someone else's script, whether you have created your own values or accepted others' values, whether you have affirmed existence or merely endured it. The honest answer tells you everything about whether you are truly living. I asked myself immediately, could I will the return of my life exactly as I had lived it? The answer was complex. Yes to my solitary work, my pursuit of truth, my authentic relationships, my independence from academic conformity. These I would gladly repeat infinitely. No to years wasted in university politics, energy drained by resentment, power leaked to others' opinions, time spent defending myself against critics who didn't matter. These I would refuse. To repeat even once more. This recognition transformed everything. From that moment, I began living differently. Before every significant choice, I asked, could I will the eternal return of this? The question cut through rationalization, social pressure, self-deception. If I could will its infinite repetition, the choice aligned with my authentic values. If the thought of eternal repetition caused recoil, the choice served someone else's values, not mine. This became my practical guide. Apply this test to your own life. Review the past 5 years as if you had to repeat them eternally. Which parts would you embrace? Yes, again. Which would cause recoil? Never again. The embrace reveals what is authentic in your life. The recoil reveals what is inauthentic. This review provides clear direction. Expand what you would willingly repeat, eliminate what you would refuse to repeat. Most men discover they are currently living a life they would never choose to repeat. They have spent years in work they don't value, pursuing goals that mean nothing to them, maintaining relationships that drain them, meeting standards they never chose. The thought of eternally repeating such existence is torture. This realization is painful but necessary. It reveals how far you have strayed from authentic living. It provides motivation for radical change. The practice is daily. Before significant decisions, pause and apply the test. If I had to repeat this choice infinitely, would I make it? Be ruthlessly honest. If yes, proceed confidently. The choice aligns with your authentic values. If no, recognize you are about to choose according to others' values, social pressure, or false necessity. Either find a choice you could will eternally, or, if impossible, make the necessary choice consciously, knowing it serves strategy rather than authenticity. Do not confuse this with seeking only pleasant experiences. Some suffering is necessary, some difficulty serves growth. The question is not, was this pleasant, but was this authentic? You might will the return of difficulty, faced courageously, but recoil from comfort purchased through inauthenticity. The test measures alignment with your deepest values, not pursuit of ease or pleasure. Live according to this principle, and you transform gradually from one who endures existence to one who affirms it. You make each moment worth repeating rather than sacrificing present for hypothetical future. You live authentically rather than performing for others. You create according to your values rather than meeting others' standards. Eventually, the question becomes unnecessary. You live naturally in ways you could will eternally because you have made authenticity habitual. Throughout my life, I suffered intensely. Migraines that made light unbearable, stomach ailments that made eating torture, isolation that made genuine connection rare, rejection that made recognition impossible. Any religious comfort I had rejected. Any social validation I had lost. Any conventional success I had abandoned. My books sold perhaps 100 copies each. The academy dismissed me. Society ignored me. Friends were few. Health was poor. By any conventional measure, my life was tragic. And yet, during my final productive years in Nice and Turin, I experienced such joy in my work, such power in my thought, such passionate affirmation of existence that I could will it all again. The suffering included, not despite the suffering, but as part of the whole that made possible what I created. This is the teaching I embody, that life is worth affirming, even when, especially when you see it clearly, without illusion or consolation. Here is the final and most difficult teaching. Life is suffering. Existence is tragic. There is no cosmic justice that balances accounts, no ultimate redemption that makes pain worthwhile, no transcendent meaning that justifies what happens. These are comforting lies that weak men tell themselves to. Make existence bearable. Strip them away. Face existence without consolation. And then, despite knowing this fully, without illusion, learn to say yes to life with such force that you could will its eternal return. This is not naive optimism that denies suffering, not religious consolation that promises future redemption, not philosophical escapism that transcends into abstract ideals. This is tragic wisdom, full knowledge of horror combined with total affirmation of existence. The weak respond to tragedy with life denial, better never to have been born, they say. This world is evil. Escape into the next life. The strong respond with life affirmation. Yes, again, even with all its suffering, yes. The teaching requires renouncing all consolations while embracing existence fully. This is terrifying to those who need external validation, cosmic justice, ultimate meaning. It is liberating to those who can become their own meaning creators. Life has no pre-given purpose, no cosmic plan, no transcendent telos. This is your terrible freedom. You determine what matters. You create value. You decide what deserves affirmation. This total responsibility is your glory, not your curse. Practice what I call amor fati, love of fate, not merely acceptance of necessity, but passionate embrace of it. What happened to you? What you are? What circumstances you face? These are your material for creation. You cannot change the past, but you can determine what it means. You cannot control all circumstances, but you can control your response. Amor fati means saying to life, I want nothing to be different, not the suffering, not the tragedy, not the limitations, because all of it made possible who I am. When facing difficulty or tragedy, practice this response. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what can I create from this? How can this serve my becoming? This shift from victim to creator, from passive to active, transforms your relationship to suffering. You do not seek to escape suffering, but to use it, to make it meaningful through your response. This is not masochism, but power, the capacity to affirm even what seems negative by creating value from it. The final practice. Sit quietly and review your entire life, every joy, every suffering, every triumph, every humiliation. For each significant experience, practice saying, yes, I would choose this again. Yes, this contributed to who I am. Yes, even this suffering served my becoming. This is difficult, perhaps impossible initially, but practice it. Gradually, you develop the capacity for total affirmation, not because you are deluded about tragedy, but because you have become strong enough to affirm despite tragedy. This is the highest achievement of consciousness, independence from need for cosmic justice, transcendent meaning, or ultimate redemption. You affirm life on its own terms, brutal, tragic, without guarantee, because you have become powerful enough to create meaning rather than require finding it. You have learned not how to outsmart others, but how to become the kind of being for whom outsmarting is irrelevant. You have transcended the entire framework of competition. You have achieved genuine autonomy. You have learned to affirm existence with such power that you could will its eternal return. This is the teaching. This is the transformation. This is what it means to live rather than merely exist.